Kip and Byron, you guys ready?
Yes.
Cool.
That works.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee. I am the co-chair, Byron Vaughn, along with the other half of my co-chair, Kip Silverman. Kip?
Yeah, hi. I am the other half of that co-chair subcommittee, Settlement and Policy. My name is Kip Silverman. I use he, him pronouns and been with PCCEP almost a year now. Let's see, I think I'll hand it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Kip. Thanks, Byron. Yeah, Ashley Schofield. I like to use she, her pronouns. I'm currently the full PCCEP co-chair. And yeah, I've been on PCCEP for almost 2 years now. I think August was my anniversary. So yeah, looking forward to the agenda today. So thanks everyone for being here. Carrie, how about you?
Hi, my name's Carrie Driver. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of PCCEP and a member of their Community Engagement Committee, Subcommittee. Odelia.
Hi, thanks, Carrie. Hi, everyone. My name is Odelia Zuckerman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a youth member of the PCCEP and the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. I can never remember all of those things correctly, but I think that's right. And I don't see anyone else, so I'll pass it back.
Yeah, I think that's all the members for now. And then at this time, if any city staff, PPB, DOJ, anyone else here wants to jump in and introduce themselves, I'll go first. My name's Dory Grabinski. I'm the PCCEP project manager, and thanks for being here tonight, everybody.
Good evening. I'm Mary Claire Buckley from the Portland Police Bureau. I'm Sarah Ames, she, her pronouns, a deputy city attorney with the city attorney's office. Nice to be here.
And I see Devontae just joined. Devontae, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Devontae Manyweather, member of the PCCEP. Forgive me for not having my camera on. I am currently in transit. So pleasure to be a part of the meeting with everyone.
Awesome. And I know we have a bunch of members of the monitor team here with us too. I think just we might as well wait till the portion of the meeting where we're focusing on you all to hear your introductions, because I think that's part of what we're here to do tonight. So we see you and we thank you for being here. All right, we can get slides again, please.
Okay, the community agreements. Be okay with ambiguity, call out bias, ask questions to clarify, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, speak your own truth, respect the group, respect each other, assume positive intent, be present and open to new information and perspective, share airtime, and listen actively and respectively. Today, over the overview of what we have for today's meeting, a discussion with the independent monitors, which Dory just mentioned. Then we have a review of the PPB Public Order Directive, and then we'll have open public comment, and hopefully people can come up with some good questions, answers, things of that nature. As far as updates, we got a fairness hearing on the August 29th to assess whether the Community Board for Portland Accountability Code package is fair, adequate, and reasonable, and meets the guidelines set forth in the settlement agreement. Presiding over by Judge Simon at the Marco Hatfield Courthouse. PCCEP members submitted written comments to the city last week and noted no revisions to the code package based on their feedback. PCCEP plans to give comments to Judge Simon at the hearing. Please attend. And now we go into discussion with the independent monitor.
Oh, and Byron, I see Sarah has a hand. She might
Oh.
have a note about the fairness hearing. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yes, I just wanted to note that very specifically, because the fairness the settlement agreement right now refers to the Citizen Review Committee and Independent Police Review and all those groups that are involved right now in the police accountability and investigations, along with internal affairs. We needed to amend the settlement agreement itself to implement the Community Board for Police Accountability. And it's those amendments to the settlement agreement that the court is specifically weighing in on whether those are fair, adequate, and reasonable. So he's not going to go through the 27 pages or whatever we end up with the code, but he does have to have jurisdiction and review of the settlement agreement, which is an order of the court. So just to clarify. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Sarah. That's my fault. I put that on the slide and yep, I got that wrong. So what the court is considering, you're saying, is not the code package itself, because that is firmly in the hands of the city and for the city to decide whether to implement. So what the court is considering on August 29th is those amendments to the settlement agreement, which is a separate thing, but certainly related.
That's right. And the Department of Justice has already reviewed the code to make sure it complies with the settlement agreement. So that step has been taken, and they jointly submitted these amendments to the settlement agreement to keep this thing moving.
Thanks for that correction. That's helpful. Okay, Byron, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Dorian. Thank you for the information, Sarah. Now to introductions, independent monitor Mark P. Smith and Associates. Do I go with the initial questions? Do you want me to do that?
Let's stick with this one here. So yeah,
Okay.
I think we're joined by several members of the new independent monitor team. So I think yeah, we'd just like to hear introductions from you all, get to know I think the members here will be members who will be maybe working a bit more with PCCEP and yeah, so we can just start with introductions and you guys can take it away.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Dory, and thanks to the PCCEP subcommittee for having us. Really appreciate the invitation. It's important for us to have a relationship with PCCEP and to make sure that we are accessible to them. And I can speak a little bit more about that. But the first thing I think we need to do is introduce ourselves. And so I'll start with myself, and then I'll hand it off to my team members and maybe circle back to me once more and then try to answer any questions that you might have about our role. So my name is Mark Smith. I'm the lead monitor. And just to give you a brief part of my background, and if there's any further questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them as we move along tonight. My career has been spent in civilian oversight of law enforcement, just about 2 decades, almost 20 years or so. I've worked with different agencies in different responsibilities with regard to civilian oversight of law enforcement, different parts of the country, different political climates and geographies, different sizes of departments, and also different ages of oversight agencies. To give you a couple of examples, most recently, I just ended about 6.5 years as the Inspector General for the Los Angeles Police Department. And prior to that, I performed similar roles and similar work in Chicago, in the California Bay Area, and also some time spent as a constitutional policing advisor to the Los Angeles County Sheriff. I mentioned that one in particular. It was an opportunity for me to be inside of a police department, a law enforcement agency, trying to solve issues and spot issues before they became bigger problems. And that gave me a different perspective from what I had done previously. The one other thing I'll mention is that as I moved around a few different cities in the country doing this type of work, I've had the great pleasure to work in agencies that are in different stages of a settlement agreement or consent decree, a court-ordered agreement, like Portland Police Bureau has now. I've worked in agencies that were headed into such an agreement. I've worked in agencies that were undergoing and trying to comply with such an agreement. And I've worked in agencies that successfully came out of such an agreement and were working to maintain the reforms that were put in place under those requirements. And so all of that, I think, gives me a great perspective in this role as the lead monitor. And I'm also supported by an amazing team who has a lot of similar and even more broad experience. I'm very happy to have them here tonight so that you can get to know them. I think you will be seeing a number of our faces, at least I certainly hope so, and we hope to be seeing yours on a regular basis. And so let me end this lengthy introduction, longer than I probably meant to do, and turn it over to my team members. I'll start with our deputy monitor, Brian Buckner. I realize he may be in transit as well, so I want to see if he's able to unmute or not.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Very glad to be here. My name is Brian Buckner, and I'm serving as deputy monitor for the team. And as Mr. Smith mentioned, I am in transit. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm stuck in infamous Los Angeles traffic on the 405 freeway. So I appreciate your sympathy and your prayers. In addition to serving as the deputy monitor for the team, I actually also work for the Office of the Inspector General for the Los Angeles Police Department, where Mr. Smith worked up until very recently as an Assistant Inspector General overseeing the office's audit section. Similar to Mr. Smith, I've spent the last 20 plus years working directly in civilian oversight of law enforcement or on public safety issues, including police accountability and oversight. In addition to working for oversight agencies in Los Angeles for the Los Angeles Police Department and overseeing the LA County Sheriff's Department, I've worked with communities, local governments, police agencies across the country to evaluate and establish some form of civilian oversight of their own law enforcement agency. And I've done that primarily through some roles that I had, including serving as president of the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, or NACOL. If you're familiar with that organization, I served as the president of that organization for 3 years. Very glad to be part of this team and working in Portland and getting to know all of you. Thanks, Mark. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Brian. Drive safe, and we know you'll be on the road for another 6 hours in 405 traffic or so, and hopefully not. I'll turn it over to Miss Antoinette Edwards. Antoinette, would you give an intro?
Good evening, everyone. Antoinette Edwards, and it is an honor to work with you as the community engagement specialist for this monitoring team. And I just look forward to opportunities to work with you, to learn with you, to collaborate. And I think many of you have seen and know me, so I'll just keep it moving. But thank you again for this opportunity to serve.
Thanks so much, Antoinette. And just one quick note, I forgot to mention, Brian Buckner mentioned his presidency of NACOL, and I realized I think PCCEP at least at one time had NACOL membership. I'm not sure if they still do, but it's a great organization to be tied to, and so I want to just mention that real quickly. I'll turn it over to one of our another associate monitor of ours, Russell Bloom.
Thank you, Mark, and hi all. Really glad to have the opportunity to be here with you tonight and meet you in this way. I do look forward to getting to know you all much better. I am, as Mark said, an associate monitor on the team. My professional experience in civilian oversight of police is particularly has been focused on investigations. I'm currently the independent police auditor for the Bay Area Rapid Transit District and have oversight of that Transit District's police department. You may recall that in 2009, Oscar Grant was killed by BART police. Bay Area Rapid Transit is also known as BART, by a BART police officer. And as a result of that, and as a result of the advocacy of the family and friends of Mr. Grant, an oversight structure was crafted. And I have had the genuine blessing to be able to work within that organization, originally having been hired into that agency by Mr. Smith when he was the police auditor, and that was back in 2014. I have certainly highlighted and prioritized community engagement in my work as the independent police auditor, which is in the Bay Area, and it's a wide region. The transit agency spans 5 counties. So there's a lot of engaging to do with a lot of different perspectives to absorb and really learn from. And so that's been a great test of my ability to do effective community engagement. And I continue to work on that. I want to highlight also that my entree into the realm of civilian oversight of law enforcement was as a volunteer police review commissioner for the city of Berkeley. And the Berkeley Police Review Commission is one of the oldest in the nation, having been formed in 1973. And it was there that I really developed a great passion for the work and started to recognize the importance of it and sought to do it professionally. So I feel very fortunate to be able to be working with you and for you, with the rest of my great team. Sorry for going on so long. And of course, happy to answer any questions about my experience or history if you like. Thanks. Pass it back.
You went on long because you have a lot to say and you've done a lot of work in this industry, which is really to be admired. So thank you. Another person who's done a lot of work in this industry is Dr. Susruta Sadula. Susruta, would you do an intro?
Thank you, Mark, and good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Susruta Sadula, and I'll be working primarily on data-related components for the monitorship. I currently work at the Office of Inspector General for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, where I work in investigations, policy, and data support. Previous to this, I worked with Mark at the IG's office for the LAPD. I've also worked in police oversight in Chicago and in New York City. So specific to consent decrees, settlement agreements, I worked as a senior performance analyst in the audit division of the Chicago Police Department when they were under their consent decree, still under it, but when they started under their consent decree. I worked proactively on projects related to the settlement agreement and performed audits for the monitoring team to provide them with additional information for their assessments. I have a doctoral degree in criminal justice from John Jay College in New York City, and I have experience working with larger data sets and writing recommendations for various agencies. I look forward to working with you all. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susruta. And we have another doctor who is going to be really valuable to our team and the assessments that we need to be conducting, and that's Dr. Robert Fornango.
All right, thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone, and welcome thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Rob Fornango. I have a PhD in criminology and criminal justice. I'll be working with Dr. Sadula on the data analytic components of the independent monitorship. And my background is mixed between criminology and criminal justice, where I spent about 15 years in academia, doing primarily program and policy evaluations, as well as studies of violent crime trends over time. And then for the last 10 years, I've spent my time working in the healthcare industry, again, doing program and policy evaluations and program monitoring for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, as well as for 18 different states in the country, working with their state Medicaid services. So my background is largely around that program and policy evaluation component, as well as monitoring and policy assessment, policy recommendations. And I'm looking forward for the opportunity to work with all of you and move the settlement agreement forward.
Thanks, Rob. And just to close out, we have 3 other team members who I'm trying to make sure I'm not missing them on our list. I think they weren't able to make it tonight. I won't do justice to attempt great introductions for them, but I'll just give their names so you know them all. One is Che Ramirez. He has a lot of expertise working in issues of homelessness and service provision to those who are houseless. He works currently for the mayor of Los Angeles I believe on a contract basis, and previously under prior mayoral administrations served as deputy mayor dealing with issues of homelessness in Los Angeles. We also have Corey Lowe, who is a recently retired deputy chief from the Albuquerque Police Department. As some of you might know, Albuquerque is just completing, coming out of a consent decree, and they have met full compliance just sort of within the last series of months here. And so that was a very successful end to that agreement in Albuquerque. And Corey Lowe spent the last 6 or so years of her career there as deputy chief in charge of accountability for that police department. And then lastly is Val Thomas. Val recently retired from Los Angeles Police Department as a senior captain. She spent her career in many parts of that very large agency, but the last part of her career as a captain was over LAPD's internal affairs system, dealing with all kinds of both administrative and criminal issues with regard to internal affairs investigations. She also spent some time in her career as when she was a sergeant in the LAPD's Office of Inspector General. So she was actually assigned to help with the Civilian Oversight Office of Los Angeles Police Department. So all of that, I know that was long introductions, and I appreciate the patience of everyone on the call. I want to make sure that we're here to answer questions. The only other statement I feel like I want to make is it was important for us to go through all those intros, and meaningful to me to see to have you see what our team is made of. And in particular, I hope what comes through is that with all of our oversight experience, our law enforcement experience, including our data analysis experience as well, we have a deep commitment to making sure that there's a great connection between PPB and all of the Portland community. I believe in the mission of PCCEP very deeply. I believe it's there to be a bridge to the community, to be an advisor to the police department, to the Bureau when it is not necessarily able to hear the community voice as well as maybe it should, and PCCEP can play a role in that. In all of our work, we just believe very deeply in the importance of that. And so seeing the success and the longevity of PCCEP is of tremendous value to us, even as we are here to do our monitorship role. And so that's why it's really important for us to be able to be here tonight, and why I so appreciate the invitation and the time that you're spending with us. With that, I think I'll turn it back over to the co-chairs, and we'll do our best as a group to answer any questions you have or engage in any discussion.
Great. No, thank you for that. Thank you for all the introductions. We appreciate as many of you have showed up on short notice. Yeah, we're very, the entire committee has, not just the subcommittee, has expressed a great deal of interest in learning more about the people on your team, the approaches that you're going to take, and how we can work closely together. So I guess I'll pick up from this slide. One of the, as you're probably aware, the COCL would create a report on a quarterly basis and share or review that report through PCCEP and other means quarterly. And our understanding is that currently that the cadence of your reporting will be on a biannual, that's correct, I think, basis. So a lot of the questions we have is understanding, your approach to assessing city's compliance with the settlement agreement, what differences or what approaches that you guys might take that might be different from COCL's, and also want to find out about the reporting cadences, we have listed a whole slew of things here: methods, reporting strategy, etc. From the settlement and policy perspective, we're extremely interested in data collection and valuation and methodology as well. So really excited to understand that you have two people pretty much focused on data itself as well as other things. So I guess let's start with the first question there. How do you see your roles differing or continuing the work the COCL has been doing?
Yeah, thank you for that. For the question and the thoughtfulness behind them and all the things that I think the subcommittee is wondering about. So our cadence for public reports on compliance, it will be semi-annual. And so every 6 months, we will be producing a report, which, as you're correct, is a little different than the quarterly reports put out by the COCL. With regard to sort of how we will be conducting our assessments of compliance, I'm not going to be able to get into sort of specific methodologies and strategies tonight. One of the first tasks for our team, as required by the settlement agreement, is to produce a draft monitoring plan. And that plan will go into further detail about what our assessments will be like, what we'll be looking for, what we'll be expecting from the Bureau, the city, other stakeholders. That monitoring plan is in draft form currently. We submitted it to the parties for their comment. Once we submitted it, they have a 15-day period to get their comments back to us, and then we will take those into consideration before we finalize the monitoring plan and file it with the court. And at that point, it'll be a public document. So where we're at now is in that 15-day period. The parties are drafting or coming together with their comments for us to consider. And so for that reason, I don't have sort of specifics yet to share with you on exactly, or precisely, I should say, what the methodology will be. I can speak a little bit more broadly about what it'll be informed by, however. Again, I know we went on for a bit with the introductions, but I'm really glad that you let us do that, because what the assessments will be informed by are the experience and knowledge that we have on this team. Everything from our deep civilian oversight experience, which you heard from a number of us, to the law enforcement experience that we have on our team, both specifically with compliance in a now successful exit from a settlement agreement or a consent decree, as well as experience handling very complex and high volume administrative investigations in a large police agency. It also will be informed by, as you mentioned, Kip, the data analysis expertise in law enforcement specifically, as well as other practice areas that will, I think, be of value in making sure that our assessments are rigorous, that they come from a knowledgeable standpoint, that they are fair and objective. We commit to always pardon the expression, but I think I've always found it appropriate, and I've said it for most of my career. We will always call balls and strikes like we see them. We have no interest in favoring compliance or non-compliance. Our only interest is in determining objectively whether the police bureau and the city is meeting the requirements of the settlement agreement, yes or no. And so that's what our assessments will be informed by. With regard to the COCL's approach and how things might differ, we've spent a lot of time, particularly in developing our own monitoring plan, but a lot of time even outside of that, learning from the COCL, talking to the COCL and their membership. And I have great respect for the depth of work that they've done over the years. And as a team, we have great respect and optimism for all the work done by all the stakeholders, and that includes PCCEP since its formation, to succeed in eliminating a substantial amount of the settlement agreement through compliance. There's a lot to be recognized there and acknowledged. As far as the COCL's approach, I think there certainly will be some similarity. The job is not entirely dissimilar, although we come at it from a more independent approach. But we're assessing compliance like the COCL was. Might there be times when our assessments are fairly similar to theirs? The data that we're looking at, the reports that we're requesting? Absolutely. And again, I have a great respect for the work that they did and spent a lot of time reading their past reports. Might there also be times when we judge something differently based on our experience, based on what we're seeing from the department, from the Bureau, pardon me, or based on a decision that we make that there are different data points, records, policies that we feel are important to look at than what the COCO happened to feel. Yes, that's a possibility as well. So all those things are indeed possible, but one of the biggest differences is one of the ones you mentioned earliest on. Our requirements are semi-annual reports as opposed to quarterly, and that's one of the key changes you'll see from the COCO.
Cool. So I've got a follow-up on that, which is I feel pretty important to the work that we do as a whole committee and our subcommittees, is that we hear from our various communities, stakeholders, individuals, groups, the amici, of course, bring issues to our attention as events unfold or as new directives come out or new policy. And part of the work that we do is consuming that, discussing it here in public meetings, and we have 3 to 4 meetings a month. So it's a lot for us, but it doesn't seem a lot for other folks that do this full time. So I think one of the benefits of the quarterly reporting on the scorecard piece of it was, at least for the year that I've been involved, was the ability to kind of tie in a more timely manner the work that's being done, whether it's going well or not going well, in mostly compliant or not quite compliant, and also tie that back to what's happening in the communities themselves. And then it takes us time to gather enough information. We have town halls, we have working groups, discussions. It takes us a while to formulate based on all the data points that we have, all the input, and come up with a recommendation, which is also time consuming. So the first thing that came to mind when we had heard that that there would only be 2 formal reports put out per year is that does, in my opinion, give us, makes our job a little bit harder in responding with the input from the monitoring agency towards how things are going, plus the feedback and input we're having from the community. So the question I think I have there, and sorry, that's a long runway to get to it, is how do we stay as effective as we can be when there might be a long period of time between these evaluation periods? And then it takes us, of course, a great deal of time to make sure we're representing the community correctly and thoughtfully when we do develop a recommendation. I'd like to kind of get an understanding of how we might be able to bridge that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Message received as far as the concern that you're raising. I'm going to try to give you a brief answer, and then I'm teeing up or queuing up a couple of my team members to see if they have things to add. For me, one thing that strikes me is there are interesting similarities, in my opinion, between PCCEP and what it's here to do and the monitor and what we're here to do. The PCCEP members are meant to be an independent body, not beholden to any particular city agency or community group. You are PCCEP, and you are there to also ensure that PPB is doing what it needs to do to police constitutionally, professionally, and meet all the requirements of the settlement agreement. And so just wanted to note that similarity as you ask your question about how we're going to remain sort of engaged with you. More specifically, it's our intention to have coverage of as many of PCCEP's meetings, subcommittee and general meetings, as we can. We want to be present, both just to observe, to do our role of assessing compliance with the settlement agreement and the paragraphs that apply to PCCEP, which I know are in self-monitoring, but 141 through 152 with a couple that have been eliminated in there. We'll be watching those paragraphs and the self-monitoring that the city and Portland Police Bureau is doing on those. So we'll be here for that purpose. We'll be here to listen, and we'll be here in these meetings because we want to be accessible and just readily available to have a conversation if you have questions or things you want to discuss. So we'd like to be present. We plan to be present. The last thing I'll say before I maybe turn it over to a colleague of mine or two is we do appreciate your patience. So we are just past our first month of the monitorship. We have a number of setup things we are still working on now, but we're working on them fast. And so it may take us just a little time to get up to full speed. But once we do, we really want to have a standing connection with PCCEP and an ability for you to reach out to us easily, ask questions, get responses quickly without any unnecessary, undue delay or bureaucracy. With that, I know I'm talking a lot, which is probably not the greatest idea. I'm going to check and see if any of my colleagues have things they want to add. And I'll ask two of the people who I know will be present a lot will be Antoinette and Russell. And I just want to check in to see, not to put you on the spot, if there's things that you want to add to that answer before we go forward.
I'll go ahead, Antoinette, and just very briefly want to echo what Mark said about our intent to be present, to be available as frequently and as in-depth of questions as you may have, and that we're able to answer. But I also just want to highlight the approach. The approach is important, and I think we are on the same page when we talk about the importance of, for example, opportunities for public discussion about pressing matters. That is how we can learn about whether things are effective, whether there need to be tweaks in our approach or the way that we listen and hear. I think only by being engaged, and this is an incredible opportunity and a way to do it, is through this organization and these meetings, can we really be informed about the impact of policing on the people that the police department, so the police bureau serves. I just want to highlight that is of paramount importance from my perspective, and I think our whole team would echo that, that we want to be listening. And, you know, my job as auditor, I like to point out, to audit means to listen. And I think that it really highlights the importance of paying attention to what's being said and by whom and how, and really learning the language that we're all speaking together. So thanks for the opportunity to chime in there.
I don't have a lot to add. I have been participating and listening and learning from the PCCEP meetings. And as Mark has stated, we're committed to doing that. And I think I would ask, what has worked best for you? How can we support that? And with the past monitoring team, lessons learned that we can build from together. So I'm really open to learning more from that. And just that last question, what will replace Cocoa Town Halls, formerly hosted by PCCEP? I don't want to speak out of turn, but something's working. Are we replacing? What do we add on to, and how do we support what has worked well? So I think I'm just saying that to say it's not to go and erase anything, but to build on where you are, because in my mind, PCCEP is the monitoring that's in place when everyone else goes away. You're the ongoing support. So how do we support you in building that within the compliance, within the job that we're tasked to do? So it's really working, as Mark has shared, hand in hand with you.
Cool. Thank you all. I appreciate that.
Go ahead, Byron.
Thank you, Dory. Thank you for that, Kip. I had a few items I was wanting to run by you. I hear that your staff, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, most of them are retired police officers. So policing the police doesn't rub the community the right way sometimes. You said that you call balls and strikes. How do you call the 50-50 balls? Inside, out, low. I'm a big baseball head. Oakland Athletics is my favorite team. So you're talking my language when you're talking baseball. Partial compliance, full compliance. Where are you starting off with that? You don't have to speak on that right now. Is partial compliance good enough for you to say, hey, we've done our job, we're moving on? Honest feedback. Hey, PCCEP, this just ain't working. PCCEP, they're not listening. Let me see. Also, yes, a lot of you are in the big cities. Portland, I would say, is a mid city. How do you, and you don't have to answer this yet, but just a question to think about. How are you going to navigate that and not try to use a heavy hand that you would use in a bigger city than you would in a more of a small community city in a sense? And where was I? Oh. You said you couldn't talk about what you're going to do. You guys are laying down a monitoring plan. So you kind of cut into my question, like what's on your guys' agenda? What's your first attack? You have a short window. You have a short window to finish this, to get to the finish line on this. Do you have any grassroots staff that live in Portland outside of Antoinette? And I believe there was another one. We're going to be getting grassroots information, not just we're police. We're retired police officers. We know how to buddy, ha ha, wink, wink. This all sounds good and dandy right now. But how am I maximizing your efforts? Because we're kind of tired of asking for things that they already know that we want. We keep asking for things that they already know what we want. They keep, well, what do you want? Well, you already know what we want. We want compliance, not partial, not substantial. We want full all through the whole thing. So please indulge me.
Thanks.
Can
sorry.
I just respond?
Yeah,
Can you
please.
hear me,
Go ahead.
Byron? I really appreciate your sharing. Grassroots, I live here, and as you stated, and I take this really personally because when everyone's gone, I'm going to be here. And I feel that my integrity comes with this process. My relationships with police, with community, I bring that to this experience. And I really hear you, brother. Police heavy. I've met the staff, the two women that have worked with the police, as I have worked with the police, as you have. But when it comes to community, I think what I hear is that concern. Will you listen to us? Will you take this seriously? I commit to that. And that is about listening to community and responding to their concerns. This is real time. As we're discussing compliance, we get to watch throughout the nation that we're still struggling with some of the same issues. So I hear you with that. What I'm asking you to do, and I'm going to just put it right out there, I'm going to ask you to take me to lunch. Can we pay for lunch? Oh, coffee. And let's have that conversation, because I really want, and I have met with some PCCEP staff, and I'd like to meet with you and hear more about that. And I'll stop there, but my commitment is grassroots. That's my strength. That's my passion. And code for that is relationships. And you have to build those, to build that trust in, to build that listening in. And we'll talk more about those listening sessions and how do we share that information with all community members, and not just checking a box at, well, at least 2 town halls. This isn't about checking the box. This is what really works, and are we effective? and I've watched you all in PCEP, and you've done the surveys. What worked, what didn't work, and I've heard your frustrations about that. So I'm here to be that listener, that learner, and that problem solver together. So I'll just give you my information. No, Pastor Weisner gave me your phone number, if that's okay. So I'm just going to put him on blast. So can we continue that as well? I just want to interject that I hear you. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thanks for that commentary, Antoinette. Really appreciate how you communicate our approach and how we feel about things, including the grassroots nature of this monitorship. You are our tie to the community for sure. But I hope it's okay if I mention that, you know, in my introduction, I said I've worked for a few different cities and I've been very blessed and fortunate to do so. And although I'm from LA originally, I've fallen in love with all the places that I've worked. And it's just maybe a bit of coincidence. If I heard you correctly, I hope I did. Oakland A's is your team. I won't go deep into baseball. That's not what we're here to do tonight. But I lived for a long time in the Bay Area, in a couple different stints, and fell in love with many things about that location, many things about the work of trying to improve policing in that metropolitan area, and fell in love with their team as well. And I'm an Oakland A's fan too from some time ago. So although I'm in Los Angeles and Antoinette is our team member who's there on the ground in Portland, our team and myself plan to spend a lot of time there. We just had our first, I've been there multiple times during this process of the selection for the monitorship. We just had our first team visit. I was there for a full week, learning different parts of Portland. I plan to come back at the end of this month, and I'm already planning to come back at the beginning of next month as well. I plan to be there a lot, and I want to enjoy the work of making sure that Portland has the right type of policing, like I've enjoyed trying to do in other places as well. And so I do want to have those ties to the community, even if I'm not there on the ground like Antoinette is. We also have the option at any time of adding on an additional team member or two if we should need to, someone else local to Portland. So that's always on our minds as well, because we want that connection to be valid and real. And so that's something that we will always sort of consider if it makes sense for the team to add someone there. I tried to make notes. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to run through a couple of your questions. I'll do my best to get them all. I appreciated all of them. With regard to our law enforcement staff, Antoinette mentioned this very briefly. There are 2 of our 9 members who are former law enforcement, and I believe that they provide tremendous value to this team. I do believe in the concept of policing themselves, but I think that's not where it ends. So I think that a healthy police department should have a healthy discipline system where it polices itself. I can say the same for corporations and other industries throughout the country and the world. They ought to have an internal system of controls that is working in a healthy and effective way. However, I don't think that's enough. And when it comes to law enforcement specifically, and where the stakes are so high and it results in loss of life when things go wrong, there ought to be something more than that. And that's why a lot of our team has spent their careers in oversight of police that do have internal controls as well, but then add an external independent control. And so that's what I believe in. So our 2 sworn retired members, I think, provide tremendous value, because one of them spent the last 6 years making sure that Albuquerque Police Department was conducting itself in accord with its consent decree, full implementation, making sure they're policing constitutionally. And our second retired member spent the better part of the senior part of her career in internal affairs, a really difficult job in an agency that large. And you mentioned sort of big cities, and LA is certainly one, and their police department is big, and their number of complaints per year in the thousands is big. And to handle all those correctly, and to make sure that justice is done in an administrative fashion, that officers who need to be exonerated are, and that officers who deserve some sort of corrective action up to termination, that they get that action. Tough job. And that was what she took on. And so I think they provide tremendous value to us. Just a couple other things you mentioned. I'm sorry if I don't get to all of them. The size of the city Yet we have a really nice variety on our team. I think that really provides us our strength. And certainly, I know I keep talking about me, but it's definitely not just me. We have someone who is here, hopefully she's still on the call, who's out on the East Coast, New York and New Jersey, who has worked with different sizes of agencies, including in big cities, New York and Chicago and LA. We have folks who worked you heard Russell Bloom, who works in a special district in California, a transit district that touches parts of, I believe, up to 4 or 5 counties now, and he'll correct me if I get that wrong, but is a specialized policing agency. We've got a nice variety, and we've got the retired officer, deputy chief, again, no longer sworn, from Albuquerque, very, very similarly sized police department, and I believe relatively similarly sized city. And her guidance is going to be really valuable to us as we go about our job as well. So last one I had, I think, on my list, there might have been 1 or 2 more. Our first attack. I mentioned it before. That monitoring plan was our first real task. It was a heavy lift to get done in a very sort of expedited fashion. And so it is now, again, under review by the parties. But that was the first thing we needed to complete. After that, we're going to continue our learning of PPB, all aspects of it, our learning of the community, our learning of the history, which is not blind to us. Again, in our work, we've seen in different places a lot of troubling and often tragic histories with regard to policing when things have gone wrong. That's part and parcel of what many of us do. We're aware of Portland's history, but we need to learn more and become more intimately familiar with it. We will do that. And then that will all lead up to our first set of assessments to see, can we help accelerate PPB into full compliance with this settlement agreement? As Antoinette said, not because we want to see if all the boxes are checked, but because we believe that will create better policing for everyone in Portland from every corner of the city. And that is what we believe in. So, all right. I think I got to most of them. I might have missed 1 or 2.
You're fine, man. That's no problem.
I'll end with it. I'll lastly say, for members of my team, please, I go on way too long, as you guys know. Unmute yourselves or raise your hand. Either way, I want you to have a voice in this, not just me. So please don't hesitate.
And I won't talk as much or more than I should. I just wanted to add to your point. It was very important that we, I don't want to say hit the ground running, but with a solid foundation. And the very first meeting that we engaged in, the monitoring team, after we signed the contract, was with the AMAC. And that was very important for us to meet with them and to learn from that historical knowledge as a part of how this settlement came to be. So I just need for everyone to know that was not lost on this team. And Dr. Haynes, with Dan and Pastor Weisner did a very good job of sharing that with the team. And for me, it was personal again, because with many of the people that they had mentioned in the past that had been murdered or the homicide are families that I worked with. So we want you to know that the grassroots of that, the historical context of that was important for us. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for that, Antoinette and Mark. I appreciate your explanations. They were beautiful. Portland, Oregon is a very unique city. Very unique. And I love it.
I was hoping to maybe chime on and piggyback on Mark and Antoinette's comments as well, particularly around, Byron, your comment about how navigating Portland as being more of a small community and a community of neighborhoods. And I know that many of us are currently living in or working in large cities. I know for myself as a researcher and as an academic, I grew up and I spent 25 years in St. Louis, Missouri, which is a little bit bigger than Portland, but it's very much a city of neighborhoods. 79 recognized neighborhoods in the city, 94 municipalities in the county, and they are all independent and unique and individualistic in their own ways. And as it's being trained as a criminologist and in studying crime, very much adopted a communities in crime perspective, which meant that I looked at specifically the the ways that the communities interact with the social institutions, including the police, including healthcare, including government, including education. So it becomes it's a very central thing. I mean, the Portland is a city of communities in the same way. And I recognize that each is very, very unique. And doing my research to learn, as Mark said, one of our jobs is to learn about the city. And I've spent a lot of time studying the neighborhoods so far, and I can see how individualistic and how unique they are. And having spent time in the city, I've seen that as well. So I will hope to bring that. I want to bring that. I try to bring that to everything that I do, and that I've done research-wise when I look at any type of program or policy and have to evaluate it or monitor it. And then a second element of that is coming from my background working in healthcare. And I know some of my colleagues have heard me say this before, and I'm sure it won't be the last time that I say it, but spending a decade working in quality improvement for healthcare, one of the mottos that we had on the teams that I worked with was that we took time every day to think about the patient, especially when we're dealing with data and we're looking at data all the time and we're trying to figure out, we need to collect some data here and we need to get this different piece of data. And, it's very easy to get lost in that data. So we had to take some time to think about the patient. And in this case, it's a similar situation. And in this case, the patient is the city of Portland, the community, its residents, all of the stakeholders involved, whether it's PPB, PCCEP, other community agencies and organizations. You're all there together. We're all in this together. And ultimately, if we adopt, from my perspective, to think about the patient is to think about how all of the stakeholders move through this and come out on the other side in a better position than what has been in the past. And that's a perspective that I hope my colleagues will adopt as we go through this process.
Odelia?
Yeah, I appreciate all of this conversation, and I think really what PCCEP is all about is community engagement and getting as many people in the room as possible and as many voices of the community that aren't heard or are silenced in different ways. And so I think for people who don't know about this process, which is a very bureaucratic independent monitor, what is that? It's not something I would know if I wasn't here. And just thinking about engaging that, and even I think it's great to use our committee and PCCEP as a place to be a liaison, but even so many community members don't know about PCCEP or don't have trust in the process of PCCEP. And so there's always so much more than that. And that's not my question at all. So I'll get to it now. And it's just more something I wanted some clarification on. And I saw a few articles a few months ago about this, and I was just wondering about John Thomas's role on the team, who's the UCLA police chief. And I know they weren't an associate, but I think I saw that they were under investigation for some things at UCLA, and I was wondering if you could speak to their role now on the team here.
Sure, I can try to speak to a couple of things that you mentioned. We want to make sure that what's going on with PPB and the reforms in particular that need to be taking place are easily communicated to anyone who is interested in hearing them. I didn't intend to keep talking about my background because I'm sure it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but somehow I keep ending up doing so. For my time in civilian oversight, my 20 years or so, it was always a struggle for our office to conduct effective outreach to the community. Not many people know about the Office of the Inspector General at the City of Los Angeles Police Department, or I can name many other agencies. Some do, and many stakeholders do, and pay close attention to them, but the bulk of the city doesn't. It's a challenge, and so it's something that I am used to, that I've always worked to try to mitigate by being an effective communicator and by being as accessible as possible, working on that now as a team. And I'll, at minimum, keep in mind and make sure that our team keeps in mind the perspective that you just raised, and making sure that we are paying attention to that, making sure that all audiences can hear us, know how to reach us. So thank you for mentioning that. And then very quickly, with regard to John Thomas, known as JT, he was a member of the team early on as we were going through the selection process. He stepped down from the team. He's no longer a member of the team.
Thank you.
Mark, if I could just add, this is Russell Bloom, Associate Monitor, add that, one of the things, and Mark has spoken to exactly the struggle that I've experienced, that he and I have experienced together, that I've come to understand both working as a professional in oversight and trying to get people to be aware of the services we provide, complaint receipt, complaint investigation, policy review. On the flip side of that, working as a volunteer police review commissioner or community board member, helping people understand what the meetings are about, what we're talking about, getting people to attend is always a challenge. People have childcare needs and work responsibilities and are exhausted sometimes at the end of the day to come to a community meeting, and it does become challenging. Learning how to work through those challenges has been sort of a long arc, but I've come to really believe deeply that while it's very helpful to have a central location or event or meeting for people to come to, and to learn how to get people to be aware of that is another kind of art and skill. Also, importantly, going to where people are to talk to them and listen to them, making it as easy for folks as possible, valuing people's time, treating people like the experts that they are when you're collecting information and perspectives from them. I just want to say that it's a varied and multifaceted approach to effectively hear community voice, and it is never going to be one homogenous voice, and a community is not a monolith. And as Dr. Rob said, a community that's made up of individualized neighborhoods, really more than many others, requires multiple forays into neighborhoods where people are talking to each other, expressing their concerns, hashing things out, absorbing news. So that's part of being on the ground there as often as we can as well. And, learning obviously from the guidance of our resident expert, Antoinette Edwards.
Thanks for that. Ashley?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, this has been a really good conversation. I do really look forward to the work ahead. It's great. I'm really excited to work with you all. I think one question that's come to my mind, well, just curious how you are engaging with PPB, and and I ask that because I think with PCCEP, and I'm trying to channel my Celeste, my other co-chair, who can't be on the committee anymore, but always thinking about PCCEP's relationship with PPB and the officers, and just being able to translate what we're hearing from the community to them, and then vice versa, like, stops data. We've been talking about how that needs to be more digestible for the community, but we're just kind of lost. I know Chief Lavelle comes a lot. We do have some PPB officers that do come and engage with us, but there still seems to be this disconnect a tiny bit around the listening on both sides. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that, and how you are engaging with PPB, and how we can possibly learn from you how to have that better with particularly with the members. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Ashley. As far as our engagement with PPB, at the moment, it's very much a learning phase. So our first visit, we did spend a lot of time with different units within PPB to understand exactly how they go about their work as it relates to the settlement agreement specifically, how they prepare and collect data. And so we'll be in a appropriate position to make assessments on the requirements that they're supposed to meet. So right now we're learning them. We have spend time with officers on the street. We plan to do more of that. We have spent time with some of the PPB leadership and executive staff. All of the above, we want to be learning them. And I hear you about communication with them as well. It's one part of your question sparked something that I think I meant to say earlier, and so I'll try to squeeze it into the answer to this question as well. As far as our role, I do want to be very clear and unequivocal, and not allow for sort of confusion if we can avoid it. The role of the monitor is to assess compliance with the settlement agreement. So that's what we will be focused on. I do believe that there should be and needs to be good communication and understanding between PCCEP and PPB, and them listening to the messages that you're sending them. And I think there are specific paragraphs in the settlement agreement that frankly speak to that. PCCEP is supposed to be sort of a group that has an advisory capacity, the ability to talk to PPB and make sure that their community engagement is as effective as it ought to be for the citizens. And if they're not hearing, that's a concern. And so although those paragraphs are in self-monitoring phase, as we work with PPB on developing its own self-monitoring plan, and as we make assessments of their self-monitoring, I think it's one of the things that we'll look for, because that's the function of PCCEP, and so it needs to be working right in order for them to be in substantial compliance, in my opinion. So I tie things back as much as I can to the settlement agreement. That is our authority. That is our role. And we don't have authority beyond that. But your comment about making sure that that communication is healthy, to me, that is wrapped up in some of those paragraphs, because that means if it's not healthy communication, then the system's not working as designed. And so we need to find a way to fix it if that's the case. Again, I want to thank you for the question. Any other thoughts from my colleagues is great, but if not, happy to keep going.
Great. Thanks for that response, Mark. Barb?
Hi, thank you guys for coming here and introducing yourselves and everything. I have a couple of questions. One is, have you guys been, or are you guys going to go on some ride-alongs with the officers and supervisors and what have you? That's one question. A second question is, you said you guys have 9 members, and I'm just super curious about how many are doing this full-time and how many are doing it part-time. And I think that's good for me right now.
Got it. Thanks for that, Barb. With regard to ride-alongs, the answer is yes. That is part of what we do in trying to understand PPB, learn how their policing is done, learn what problems exist with regard to the settlement agreement, learn what successes there are with regard to the settlement agreement. That sort of direct, close observation is something that most, if not all, of our staff is very used to in the work that they've done with regard to criminal justice or police oversight. And so it is just one tool. And I do understand that there sometimes are differing views on whether or not ride-alongs are appropriate or valuable. I've heard a conversation about that before. I respect the different views on that, but I do think it's a valuable tool for us. So we have already, some staff have already conducted ride-alongs or participated in ride-alongs. Other staff will do more. We have done a few with officers. One of our staff members did it with a sergeant specifically. And so the answer to your question is yes, we have done some and we'll be doing more of them. It's just one of the tools I think we'll use in making knowledgeable assessments. With regard to full-time and part-time, so I can give you sort of a basic answer. I want to let people sort of define for themselves what their status is. So for me, this is my full-time position, and so I resigned as the Inspector General for LAPD just recently, so that I could focus on this as my primary professional responsibility. So for me, this is my job. We have a couple other folks I mentioned who are retired from law enforcement, and they have agreed to be a part of this team. We have other folks who do have other full-time jobs, but are taking this on as additional secondary employment. So it varies a little bit. And if any team members want to speak on that or any other questions, I'll let them speak directly. But the answer is it varies a little bit. But for me, this is my job.
You have me 100%. I'm retired and rehired. So, and feel free to reach out.
And
I will to you.
we are glad that we do.
I can also go ahead and just speak for myself as well. I actually own and operate my own analytics firm, and so this is a role in which currently I am operating in a part-time capacity, but with highly variable availability as is needed by the team and as is needed by the process and the role of the independent monitorship. So not full-time, but can certainly make adjustments as needed to make sure that the independent monitorship and that the settlement agreement are successful.
I think Pastor Weisner had his hand up.
Thank you, Byron. I try to stay quiet on the sideline here, but I am wanting to commend PCCEP again of an outstanding communication form, bringing along the independent monitoring to have them to set before you. Great questions. I just really like to say that to the PCCEP group, your strength is who you are. It is founded upon what this settlement agreement is. The things that you move forward to, the accountability you already have. And Ashley and Odelia and others who have seen and come along, we need continuously, this whole team, to be able to make sure Portland represents its own voice in this. You have a great leader in the outreach team with Antoinette, who is historical. And I can tell you without a doubt, you're in good hands. The question I would go to with Mark is, I would like to hear more about what will replace the Cocoa Town Hall. Maybe you addressed it a little bit there, but I would like to hear a little bit more in that question, if you don't mind. But again, I try to be quiet, so let me just stay out of the room and just hear what it is that I'm hearing. And I appreciate all of the questions and opportunity to even know this group and this unified collection of where we're going with this new independent, and again, the city, who have done so much of trying to make sure that we get the answers for the justice that so many rightfully deserve.
Thank you. It's great to see you and hear your voice again after a couple of weeks. And I'm happy to start. Antoinette, you want to start or you want me to go?
I'm happy to share. And I think, I don't know if it's Adelia. Did I say your name correctly? When you said we've reached out and sometimes we don't get to everyone. And I think my partner, Russell, shared, how do we meet people where they're at? So I can't give you a set number of meetings, but it's going to be outreach. And that means reaching out. And I met with Chief Lavelle, Chuck Lavelle. He's assigned to community engagement, the police. So Ashley, I really appreciate your question. And I'm learning that there are so many groups that the police at their roundtables, community groups, cultural groups. And I think it's important to have an understanding of who they are, to meet with them, and most importantly, that we're sharing the same message. I think it gets lost in translation. So it's that community message that if the police are meeting with folks, it's the message I'd share with them. If I'm going to POIC, if I'm meeting with Lipo Chow, it's that same message. So I think there are as many meetings that are needed for people to get the message in an effective way. And for that means in a language that they can understand. That it's not police speak or it's not bureaucratic speak. It's that folks can understand in a way that they can be involved in the conversation and make recommendations and comments. So I think it's open, and I'm going to lean on PCCEP again for that meeting list that you've attached and even more. But I think we can't answer that. If we answer that, we would be wrong. And how many meetings? It's going to depend on the people that we're reaching out to or reaching out to us and how do we respond. But it's not going to be based on the town hall. I think, again, I wanted to allude that what worked best with COCO and how can we evolve and learn from that and do more. So I hope that's a part of it, but I've already started to meet with folks in the community to learn about what they want, what they want to hear, and more of that to come, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Antoinette, and also Byron, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Great. And I'll just mention, I put this in the chat, but following up on the question you elevated, Pastor Wisner, at the Community Engagement Subcommittee next week, PCCEP plans to discuss that third question a little bit more. We've heard from the committee that there is interest in maintaining some of that connection through something similar to maybe the COCO town halls, but there's also a general feeling that maybe that experience can be improved upon in various ways. And, I think the discussion about increased outreach and meeting people where they are and all of that are absolutely some of the currents that have come up in those discussions. So yeah, I think a lot of good stuff here. So if you're interested in that discussion and helping PCCEP work through some of the ideas they have around it and then bring those back to the monitor team, feel free to join us next Wednesday. We'll be talking about that. Yeah, so this has been a super great discussion. I'm not seeing any other hands right now. Anyone else want to get in there while we're still talking?
Yeah, I'll just follow up with I appreciate the answers, the conversation. I know things are still in flight, so really looking forward to seeing what the working relationship's going to be with us, what the approach that you guys have proposed finalizes to, and we hope that when you have that available, you can come and talk to us about what that looks like and what the next steps are. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Well, we on behalf of the team, we again really appreciate the invitation. As I try to close out here, there's one thing that sort of sparked with me as you were talking about the town halls, and I'm thinking back to the language of the settlement agreement, and hopefully I'll be quoting it or paraphrasing it correctly here. Antoinette said it absolutely right. The requirements are a couple of town halls per year. That for us is a floor and not a ceiling, and our interactions are going to be much broader and I think have many more tentacles and already do, frankly, than just a couple of town halls. However, that is the requirement in the settlement agreement, so we will ensure that that requirement is met. And with regard to those town halls, I believe the settlement agreement specifically calls upon the monitor to sort of consult with, in some fashion, the PCCEP to make sure that they are as accessible as they ought to be. That's written into the settlement agreement. We absolutely will be ensuring that that happens too. But again, those are just for the minimums. We'll be doing a lot more than that, but that's a connection we'll have with PCCEP on the town halls. Other than that, I worry that I've talked too much here. Our whole team is very pleased that you had us here. You're going to be seeing some and many of our faces more, which we look forward to. And we just really commit to some of those messages I talked about in the beginning. We want to be accessible to you. We want to be easily communicable to you. And so we will follow through on that through the term of our monitorship.
Appreciate that, Mark. Thank you. Oh, and Devontae has his hand up.
Go ahead, Devontae.
Sorry. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity just to kind of get to know a little bit more about who you guys are and what your wealth of experience is. I tried to kind of just have my listening ears on because I'm still a really new PCEP member or PCCEP member. But one question I did have, just because I know that you guys mentioned that there are a few members of your team who are present in this meeting who are data specialists or data analysts. I am curious to know, I guess, how it is that they go about kind of compiling some of the data that they use to determine compliance, or I guess the general state of where things currently are, and if there are any metrics of data or categories of data in particular that are more heavily weighted, or that they kind of prioritize to get a better view or perspective of where things are.
I think that's a great question. And I'm very glad that we have people who have that specific experience looking at this exact kind of data as far as compliance goes. And I will ask them to maybe unmute. Susruta, Rob?
So my background has been, I've done a lot of quantitative analyses, but I've also done like mixed methods. I think it's important to not only look at the data, but to, again, engage with communities, look at what's behind that data, and not, so in the past, I've looked, when you're looking at uses of force, for instance, looking at the reports, but then also looking at body-worn cameras, speaking to people involved, things of that nature. So utilizing different methods and different data sources to just compile a more comprehensive picture of what you're looking at, and just create like a more complex, like comprehensive story. Just such as a quick thing for me. Rob, you can go ahead if you have anything.
Yeah, so Shrita, I would echo what she has described there. I mean, there's when it comes to working with these kind of data, there are a lot of different sources that are coming in, both from the community, from PPB. It's a lot of pieces to bring together, and so I too have a background in mixed methods, both quantitative and qualitative. In terms of pulling things together, it's really about trying to triangulate those from multiple pieces and make sure that as you look at it from different perspectives, are those perspectives coming around a common story? Are they telling a story that makes sense, or are they telling different kinds of stories that would suggest there's a disconnect between what you're seeing from one source and what you're getting from another source? With respect to specific metrics or categories and how we would weight them, I think that's still something that we're going through and as part of developing the monitoring plan and getting that all finalized. But certainly, there are going to be things that we need to take into consideration around the type of data, where it's coming from, the quality, the validity, the reliability of what we're seeing in the data. And so all of those things will factor into that sort of triangulation approach that we use.
I know you have to move on. I just want to can you put my information in the chat, Dory? My phone number, all my digits. And Devontae, I saw your uncle Dwight yesterday and I told him how proud I am of you. Yeah, it's good to connect.
Yeah, we will make sure your information is available, Antoinette. Yes,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just want to echo what's already been said, but thank you so much to the whole team for your time and the great discussion tonight. And it's really just amazing to hear all of the enthusiasm as you're kind of embarking on this work, and especially the openness to collaborating to a really extensive degree with PCCEP. So I think yeah, great things ahead, and we're looking forward to many more meetings with you all. And we will certainly be in touch. So thank you again, everybody. Okay, so we're gonna totally pivot and move into the kind of next portion of our meeting. And I think we're passing it back to Kip for this. And so this is really just going to be an overview because we don't have too much time left in the meeting, which we expected, but kind of just to get the ball rolling on this. And then just so folks know, I expect that this might be something we pick back up on in the full committee meeting later this month. But Kip, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. As most of you are aware, we have what is known as a pretty open and my understanding, just as recently, a gold standard of the ability for public to provide input and feedback on directives and either proposed or changes to existing directives for the PPB. I would have brought this up sooner, but I was not available the last couple of weeks. But this Friday, there are 3 directives that are in the second round of review. And I apologize, I had them in front of me. If somebody could put the link into chat, I would really appreciate it. Oh, here it is. Hang on, sorry about that. No, almost. Yeah, that's not the right link. My apologies. Thank you for that. So the 3 that are currently up are Portland Police Bureau response to public order events, use of force, and use of less lethal weapons and tools. And there were some minor changes made to each of them. The public order event and the use of force are pretty dense directives, but there were a few things that we want to discuss down the road. And if there are community members that have thoughts or input, we encourage them to both take a look at the directives as they exist now and being proposed, provide feedback if you feel comfortable, and or come back to future PCCEP meetings for discussion, as we do want to get deeper into constitutional policing, when and where, how the police respond to public events, especially with the reformation of the rapid response team, use of force, both lethal and less lethal. And there are a lot of concerns is one way of phrasing it, I guess, but there are things that perpetually we have seen that haven't been addressed to sorry, I'm still fighting off this headache, but that aren't well explained or well defined. One of the challenges we have is looking at the text that members shall not use force against people who engage in passive resistance that does not impede a lawful objective. Passive resistance is a really important thing to talk about. There's little to no guidance in the current directives as to how Portland Police Bureau should engage with people who are passively resisting. The very first line item is talking about how the PPV will respect the rights of people to speak freely and gather and exercise their constitutional rights. But the only mention of passive resistance is in the preface to, I believe, that document, and one other place where it talks about use of chemical chemical weapons. So the standard for the direction in these directives is essentially that once a person is no longer following a lawful order, that the Portland Police can start introducing various forms of compelling somebody to comply, including using varying degrees or increasing degrees of force. And these are things that we feel need to be better defined and in more detail, including things that are missing, such as when to stop using force and also when to disengage or there's a lot of discussion on de-escalation methods, but there's not much discussion on when to disengage or stop. And we feel like the current directives have a very low bar for an engagement that will involve compelling someone to comply with, again, increasing uses of force. Same thing with unlawful assembly and declaring a riot. Unlawful assembly has a bare minimum of 5 people being involved. A riot could be 6 or more people. And the description of when an unlawful assembly can be declared is, again, a very low bar and does not necessarily take into account constitutional rights to, again, be involved in a civil disobedience act. So we want to revisit this from reviewing these directives to ensure that there is better instruction to police officers and members of the police force on what is appropriate approaches. With the reforming of the rapid response team, some public declarations of an expectation of a heightened need to be able to deal with whatever this election season is going to bring, and also going back to spring and some of the interactions that happened during the pro-Palestinian protests on PSU. These are things that have been raised to PCCEP as being of great concern, and these topics we want to have the community think about, talk to us, provide some feedback and input, and we will work with the PPB to come and talk about the details of this. And again, I think there's opportunity here to really get into better explanations of what engagement with people who are performing civil disobedience or passive resistance, and the best practices that exist out there that can be incorporated into a lot of this language. That was a lot to say all at once, so I'm going to stop.
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, could we, and yeah, because it's a lot of information. It's a dense directive for sure. I'm realizing, could we go back a slide? I should, totally my bad. I should have put a slide in here kind of saying what the directive is. I think I just forgot to do that. Okay. But I think it showed up in the chat, or maybe is on the first like intro slide there. But essentially, one of the directives, the PPB directives currently up for review, which is like an open process to the public where members of the public can submit comment and suggest revisions to, directives, which essentially dictate like how PPB operates, like their internal rules for, how things work. One of those is currently the public order directive. And so that really is all about how it really is getting into how the rapid response team is gonna be operating. And PCEP's been talking about the reformed rapid response team in some recent meetings. So this is a relevant one for PCEP to be taking a look at. And so some of the things that Kip is highlighting are just a few like areas of what he identified as some things that are a little vague, or maybe there's some inherent tension in some of the things outlined here. So I think that example that Kip wrote here is helpful. Like, when does something turn from passive resistance to something that is unlawful? It is an interesting concept, because like at what point could an officer, I guess the idea would be like, at what point is the determination made that passive resistance is something that is impeding a lawful objective, right? And in the example given, you could imagine that determination being made, or maybe folks have witnessed something like that. And then on the next slide, the way I understand this is more or less that what Kip's identified here is the idea that the unlawful assembly as defined in the directive is essentially just also like pretty vague and pretty broad. And some of the bolded ones here are maybe the ones that are especially vague or broad and could be interpreted with quite a bit of leeway, I suppose. Yeah. So I just realized we kind of threw everyone into that conversation, and it's my bad for not maybe priming the context with a slide or two there. So just wanted to sort of recap that and put it in the context of some of those RRT discussions that PCEP has already had. So yeah, Byron, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Dorian. Thank you for that, Kip. This when I was looking over the directive, I didn't all I felt from this was a lot of read and react from the PPB. I don't see any type of instructions, or maybe there could be something where the police are learning their own triggers, in dealing with these people, because most of the times those triggers that the officers have are not spoken about, or what is it that can put you over to make you fall into these things. So I guess that's something that I would want the community to think about, at the actual individual of each PPB member, or this response team. What are their triggers? What are some of the people that are triggers, and are they working on those triggers so they can be more more calm, and sensitive in a mind thinking way, instead of just reading and reacting. One of the parts of this thing is like, if a car's come at them, should they shoot or not shoot? They shouldn't even think about shooting or not shooting. Yet I know if a vehicle is used, it could be thought as a weapon. Yet that shouldn't be, your decision. And just, should I pull my gun or should I not? And that's just a piece of it. But my main point of what I'm trying to make is, what is the officers' triggers that make them do the things that they do? Or do they understand what they're doing when they have their triggers popping off, and they, okay, they don't know what's really going on, but they're using their training to get them through, which is sometimes could be good, sometimes it could be bad. So it just depends on who the person is.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that, Byron. Kip?
Yeah, to that end, Byron, also there is some discussion in the directives about use or a reaction based on the type of uh, 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 situation a member is facing, and that I think there's direction in it, if I remember, to not overreact because somebody might be saying things that an officer doesn't want to hear. And as we know, in Portland, we tend to be pretty vocal when we protest here. The intent of all of this, and I did jump in because I was looking at the slides and trying to speak to it in the amount of time to leave it open for questions, but the intent of all of this is that we do know that Portland has a long storied history of protests for various reasons. And we also know that in the last 20 years or so, there have been less than ideal outcomes from many of the protests, especially 2020, where the DOJ was concerned that the PPB was backsliding on some of the progress that they had made in the consent decree. So our goal, our reasoning for all of this, and the desire to get deeper into some of these directives and fleshing out some of the details of engagement and making sure it's not vague or missing things that we think it might be, or that the community has shared with us that it might be, is to make sure that we have constitutional policing and we minimize or avoid a lot of the problems that we've had in the last several years. Not to mention with the injuries that people have sustained, and feedback that the police are don't feel safe in certain community engagement situations, and we want to avoid all of that. Our goal here at PCCEP is to help usher in getting beyond the consent decree and hopefully creating a safer place for Portlanders to gather regardless of the reason for it, as long as it's in a realm of lawfulness. And when we have some vague directives, it feels like there's just opportunity for bad outcomes yet again.
Great, thanks, Kip. PCCEP members, I know we've kind of been talking about the RRT in a few recent meetings, and the directive itself is new to the meetings. So yeah, any initial thoughts this is bringing up for you, Odelia?
Yeah, thanks, Story, and thanks, Kip and Byron, for bringing this directive here. I think it's a really important conversation to be had. And yeah, man, this definition in itself of like unlawful assembly is just seems very vague and broad in a lot of ways, and brings up room for concern when we also in the past have talked about the different ways in which people or protesters with different ideologies are approached, or kind of how police interact with those folks. And it seems like oftentimes like there's picking and choosing of who should get this behavior versus this behavior. And I think that this directive leaves that very open-ended and leaves that choice in the hands of the police in a way that could honestly cause a lot of harm, as we've seen in the past. And I think like some people, yeah, we've seen this happen where people are protesting peacefully, maybe they're making some noise, and it escalates really quickly, and it could become a riot, and there can be tear gas, and like those things happen when these people are standing there making noise. And that's really like, we don't want these protesters to be harmed because of that. And so yeah, I just think like this brings up a lot, and there's a lot that can be done. And yeah, I think like this is, again, with everything we do at PCCEP, this is just the start of this conversation and how it applies to so many things, but I'll stop there.
Thanks, Odelia. Jorge?
Yeah, hi everyone. I was just gonna highlight what Odelia said. Like I've seen some, like some protests, like since, 2020 with like BLM, uh Palestine and all that, and like, climate ones, or like housing, transportation, like there's like a lot. And we've all, I bet we've all kind of seen like, a difference, especially not just like protests in Portland, but like, throughout the US, where like, the reaction has been different depending on like what the type of like matter it is about. If it's like, with like the Palestine stuff, like it's been a bit different for them at PSU for sure, with like, a lot of students from what I heard, because I work at PSU and I know that I've heard some negative stuff from students about how like the thoughts on like how they felt about police coming into their campus, where it's like, supposed to be a safe environment for, academic purposes and such. And, a whole issue occurred there. Um, so like I do want to highlight what she said, that like, I think depending on like whatever the matter people are protesting about, or like how people are seen, like, sometimes when someone is wearing like all black at a protest, sometimes it might look suspicious. But just kind of highlighting like who the people are, what the action is, and like why they're there.
Thanks for that, Jorge. Pastor Wisner.
Thank you. Could you point me to the directives? I'm trying to find the one that you state here, and so I can read it in full description.
Yes, we put it in the chat, but let's see.
The
Scrolling.
one I have is 0635.10,
That's correct.
and the directives of all of those areas are, I'm just trying to find, because 131 is Oregon directive. I'm
not
just
seeing 131.
13165, disperse or of unlawful or riotous assembly. That's what it takes me to the page. Portland Police Response to Public Order Events reference, and those reference. But I'm looking for that.
On that ordinance, Pastor Wisner, on I think it's, well, I'm looking at page 24. I might have scrolled past the first instance of it, but it's in the definitions before they get into the actual directives themselves. But there's a definition of unlawful assembly.
I've seen the definition, but it also breaks down where, and if I'm looking at that right, in each operation of where that, how force is to apply, if or what.
That is part of the problem. There's some inconsistency. There's terms that are reused and reused frequently, but they don't necessarily align with some of the details of the actions taken. And again, I think this is an opportunity for improvement.
Very good, Kip. Thank you so much. I can just always reference again to a great topic of clarity for this directive. I encountered that back in Antoinette might help me. I think it was in the 1990s when Moose was chief, and I was on the sidewalk, and there was a assembly of people who came together during the Northeast Portland and was asked to disperse and move off the sidewalk. And as people were walking off, unexpectedly, someone startled the police. And many of you may remember the shooting when Moose was the chief, how the riot came out. But I was one of those ones that they pointed the rifle at.
Mm.
However, though, I'm just trying to, like you said, to appreciate you saying that the order of how the language should be and where to be able to operate under the directives is the objective here. And that's what I was looking for specifically. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, not seeing any hands or anything in the chat. So like we said, I think this is kind of a primer, thinking about this directive here and kind of bringing it into the conversation that PCCEP's been having about RRT. Just a note, comments and feedback from the public on the second universal review are due this Friday.
Right.
PCCEP does have the ability to do off-cycle review, so I think PCCEP's going to continue taking a look at this one, is my expectation. But members of the public, if you're here and you're interested in submitting comment on this directive that has been linked in the chat, just be aware that the deadline for that is this Friday, and you are able to submit comment, and we encourage you to do that as well. Okay, so I think now we're going to transition into open public comment. We have just a little less than 10 minutes left in the meeting for that. So if you have any, oh, and sorry, co-chairs, Byron, you want to introduce this one?
I'm not too sure what are you talking about?
Oh, just inviting people to give open public comment. It's kind of for everybody.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hey, yes, people. Anybody with any comment, questions, concerns? Kayla?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think that like my comment is based on the fact that gas that's being used has quite a bit of environmental concerns, and I think that finding alternative methods would be something that PCCEP should encourage PPP to start looking into. So
Thank you for that. I'm not too sure who was next, Barb's or Dan. Go with Barb's. Babs. Did you hear me? Dan Handelman, can you hear me?
Hi, this is Babs. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was not sure what I was doing. Okay, so I tuned in about 6:30 because I was actually at the grocery store. Was pleased, overall pleased by the responses of the independent monitoring team. They were the team that I definitely supported, particularly because Antoinette is from Portland. So thanks to them and all of you for all your questions. I did put in the chat, did anything come up about Portland Street response? Did I miss that, or is that something for a further discussion?
That would be up for more discussion. I'm not too sure how more they've gotten into it.
Babs, did you see Mark's response to you in the chat? I thought that was a really good, thorough response.
I'm not sure. Part of this technically challenged here. I started watching on my phone in my car, and then I came home, zoomed into my iPad. So I'm not sure what in the heck all is going on. Are you talking?
Sure.
And I can be in touch with Mark.
Yeah, I can. Mark, you can go ahead and reiterate your response now if you'd like. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll try to do it briefly.
This Mark. Okay, there's another Mark.
Oh.
It's a community member. Okay, go
There's
ahead,
a lot of
Mark.
us out there. A lot of us out there. I know it.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I'm also a Smith, so I get that all the time. There's way too many.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
To try to say it briefly, you did not miss any discussion about about PSR specifically.
Okay.
It is part of the monitorship responsibilities to assess compliance with paragraph 115 of the settlement agreement, and that's a paragraph that regards the fully operational crisis triage. So that's one of the things that we'll be assessing. We are aware of PSR for sure. We spent some time touring and speaking with people at BOEC, if you're familiar with a BOEC and their handoff of certain calls to PSR. So we are continuing to become more and more familiar with the city's efforts at fully operational crisis triage. That I think includes currently PSR. And although I can't share with you at this moment because the monitoring plan with our specific assessment and methodologies is still in draft form, and we still have some more work to do on that, is one of the paragraphs that we will be assessing. And so to try to sum all of that up is we will be assessing whether crisis triage is fully operational, and that's what was required in the settlement agreement.
Sir, thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get lost. I support PSR 110% and see them as a valuable resource moving forward. So relieved to hear that you will be looking into their work. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well for that comment. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Babs and Mark. And Dan, let's hear from you. Are you there, Dan?
Hi, sorry I didn't unmute on the computer. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of Portland Cop Watch, and there's a couple other people from Cop Watch here tonight. There's Barbara and Mark with a C. The other Mark are here too. I got a chance to meet with the monitor team through the AMA coalition, but we need to have more discussions between Portland Cop Watch and the monitor team at some point offline. So, I do want to thank you all for having your discussion tonight. We are going to be putting in our comments about those directives tomorrow, and I'll send a copy to the staff so that you can all get it. I'm going to try to say this next part delicately and appropriately, but community members in the public only have 30 days to write in comments, and PCCEP gets extra time if they need it. And there's something inequitable about that, but it's balanced by the fact that you only get to meet a couple of times a month, and that it's very hard to write a document that you all get to agree on. But that's something we've been trying to address with the Bureau for a long time about this 30-day timeline. It's just when you have community advisory bodies that meet once a month, they have to give you more time. So I'm hoping that maybe the timeline can be extended on the whole commenting period for everybody and not just PCCEP, I guess. In terms of the town halls that need to be replaced, I put something briefly in the chat about that it's more likely than not that, and I haven't seen the plan from the monitor team yet, but that it'll be similar to the DOJ, to the COCL, where they put out a draft and you have 30 days to comment on it and then they have to finalize it, because otherwise the next report will be due. So I don't know how to do outreach to the whole community in that 30-day period more than the town hall, but I do hope that the dates that those reports are going to be put out will be published way in advance so people have an idea about how to get involved. I'm glad somebody mentioned the stop data. There was a big breakthrough on the most recent annual report that came out, where the Portland Police have been saying in the last several reports, yeah, well, the reason I'm saying gang enforcement team, but it's called the focus intervention team now, but they always say whatever the iteration of the gang team is, the reason they stop so many black people is because they're the people who are most likely to be victims of crime. But this time they admitted that there is no actual correlation between being a victim of crime and having a traffic stop imposed on you. So there's a long time coming for them to admit that. There's still some problems with the way they select their data, and I'm hoping to have more discussions with you about that later too. I saw the letter that some of you signed about the bias language in the new oversight system, both for the court and for the city code. I'm very glad that you did that. I hope some of you will be speaking on August 29th at that fairness hearing about the oversight system, because it's very important for them to hear from as many different voices as they can, especially Judge Simon. And the one last thing I want to say just specifically about the content of the protest directive that Mr. Silverman was talking about is that where it says property damage, I've been to protests where people put chalk on the sidewalk and they got accused of property damage. And that's, you know, kind of an outrageous interpretation, but that's the kind of thing that happens when the language is too vague. So I'm glad that was one of the highlighted things. It really is something that I'm hoping that you can contribute to making a more specific definition of what that means. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Kip, do you have public comment?
Yeah, just real briefly to address something Dan brought up. Dan, we have talked as part of the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee of finding ways to make the directive process more equitable and accessible, even though I was again recently informed is a gold standard for the United States. I think there's ways to improve on that also. So we will be talking about that in the future as we address priorities. So I just wanted to mention that. So I think we are, well, we're a few minutes over time. So let's wrap up. Wednesday, next Wednesday is the Community Engagement Subcommittee, where some of these topics I believe we will be continuing to discuss. And Odelia, I see your hand is up. Do you want to speak to that real quick?
Yeah. I just wanted to share more detail of our plan so folks are aware. But yeah, we want to continue the conversation of the independent monitor and just like talk about what we'd like to see from that. And also continue the conversation about this directive and all of that, just to keep that flowing. But I think our main focus was going to be a discussion about the community board on police accountability code and what we want to see or what we want to bring up in the fairness hearing. So if you all are interested in that, please stop by. That's all.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for being here. It felt like it was a great conversation. Thank you to the independent monitor. Thanks for our community members, always the regulars, and city and PPB staff. And definitely if you have feedback for us on anything that we discuss, and there are ways to engage with us on the screen right now. And Dory, I guess I'll hand it back to you.
Nothing to add. That's it. Great meeting, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you again to the monitor team and all of our PCCEP members, community members, city folks. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next week. And this meeting is adjourned at 8:05 p.m. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye,
Recording
Dory.
stopped.
Bye, Byron.
Bye.
Bye,
Nice seeing you, Pastor
Ricky. See you
Wozniak.
all.
Bye, John Boy.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care,
Very
Pastor
good.
Wozniak.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody. Stephanie, Antoinette with that.